Her horse was dying. Her children had stopped crying 2 days ago, and that terrified her more than anything. She was a widow with nothing left. No money, no home, no hope. Just a desperate prayer and the memory of 5 words a stranger once told her husband: "If you are ever in trouble, I pay my debts." So she rode through the freezing wind to find that stranger's ranch. When she finally arrived, barely able to stand, he opened his door and saw her face, and his went white as a ghost. She looked exactly like his dead wife. Was he going to help her? Or was she just a painful reminder of everything he had lost? What happened next would test them both in ways neither could imagine. Because taking her in meant opening old wounds, and staying meant she would have to fight a town that wanted to destroy her. This is a story about 2 broken people who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you were truly meant to have. It reminds us that home is not a place. It is the person who chooses to stand beside you when the whole world turns away. If you believe in second chances and the power of choosing each other every single day, leave a comment below. Hit that like button if you are ready for a story that will warm your heart. Share this with someone who needs to know that their best days might still be ahead. And subscribe so you never miss another story that proves love can be built from the ground up. The gate was open, but Eleanor just sat there on her horse, Clover. Her hands were locked on the reins, and the poor mare was swaying on her feet. Behind her, her little girl, Nora, who was just 6, was quiet. Too quiet. Her 4-year-old son, Michael, had stopped crying 2 days back, and that scared her more than any screaming. The Double T Ranch was spread out before her. It was not fancy, but it looked solid. Smoke curled up from the chimney. This was it, her last hope. She was chasing the memory of a few words a man named Thomas Ryland had said to her husband James years ago. "If you're ever in trouble," he had told him, "I pay my debts." James was gone now, and Eleanor was in a whole world of trouble. She nudged Clover, and the horse stumbled forward into the yard. Everything was neat and tidy. The kind of place a man keeps when he is all by himself. Before she could even dismount, the cabin door swung open. Thomas Ryland stepped out, and he was bigger than she remembered. He was maybe 40 years old, with dark hair getting gray on the sides and a face that looked like it had seen its share of hardship. His pale gray eyes took in the whole sorry picture in one glance. The dying horse, the worn-out children, and the woman who looked like she had been through a storm and barely survived. The speech Eleanor had practiced in her head vanished. "Mr. Ryland," she said, her voice like a dry leaf. "I am Eleanor Hartwell, James Hartwell's widow." "I remember," he said. His voice was low and rough. "You are a long way from home." "Yes," she whispered, looking at the ground. "James passed on 6 weeks ago. I tried to keep our place, but..." She could not finish. The shame was too much. The failed farm, the men wanting their money, the night she had to run away from the only home she knew. Ryland's face did not change, but he stood a little straighter. "Get down," he said. It was an order, not a suggestion. Eleanor slid out of the saddle, her legs shaking. The children climbed down after her. Ryland walked over to her horse. He ran a hand down Clover's neck, and the old mare just leaned right into him. He checked her legs, then stood up and looked straight at Eleanor. "She will not make it another mile," he said softly. "I know," Eleanor choked out. "I can work for some grain. I can..." He cut her off. "I will handle it." He turned to the cabin. "You and the children get inside. There is a fire." Eleanor was stunned. "Mr. Ryland, we did not come here to be a bother. A spot in the barn is all we need." He stopped and turned back, his eyes locking with hers. "Not the barn," he said, plain and simple. "You will take the house." The cabin was warm. It was the best feeling in the world. A stove in the middle of the room pushed out heat. The place was small but clean. There was a table, a bed, and shelves full of food. It smelled like coffee and wood smoke. Little Michael buried his face in Eleanor's dress and let out a soft cry. Nora just stared with wide eyes. "Mama, it is so warm," she whispered. A few minutes later, Ryland came back inside, carrying their few belongings. He set them on the table, then walked to the stove and ladled thick stew into 2 bowls. He put the bowls on the table with 2 spoons. "Eat," was all he said. Eleanor just stared at the food. Steam was rising from the meat and potatoes. "Mr. Ryland, I cannot accept." "You can," he answered, pulling on a heavy coat. "I will be in the barn. Sleep in the bed tonight. We will talk in the morning." "But where will you sleep?" she asked. "I have a bedroll," he said, opening the door. He paused. "Your horse is in a bad way, Mrs. Hartwell. I will do what I can." Then he was gone, closing the door behind him. Eleanor looked at her children. She saw their sunken cheeks and tired eyes. Her own hunger was a knot in her stomach. "Mama, can we?" Nora asked, her voice small. A dam broke inside Eleanor. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we can eat." They finished the stew in minutes. When they were done, Michael fell asleep right there at the table. Nora looked at her empty bowl. "Is he going to make us leave tomorrow?" "I do not know, sweet girl." "Will Clover be okay?" Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. "I do not know that either." She carried Michael to the bed and tucked him under a thick wool blanket. As she sat on the edge, the weight of it all came crashing down. She had been so sure they would be turned away. Just then, the door opened again and Thomas Ryland stepped back inside. He stepped inside, a dusting of snow on his coat, but you couldn't read a thing on his face. After shutting the door and brushing the frost from his shoulders, he looked right at her. "Your horse is in the mayor's stable for now," he said. "She's been fed and watered. I'll check on her again before dawn." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor, making her feel almost dizzy. "Thank you. I promise I'll pay you back." He just grunted. "We'll talk about that later." He walked over to the stove and poured himself some coffee from an old beat-up pot. "Are you going to tell me why you are really here, Mrs. Hartwell? Or do I have to guess?" Eleanor's hands trembled. "I told you James passed on. I lost our homestead. I had nowhere else to turn." He countered. "You had folks in Laramie. I recall your husband talking about a sister." Her chest felt tight. "My sister's husband didn't want the burden of a widow and 2 little ones. She offered prayers, but no help." Ryland's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. "I had 2 small children and no one to speak for me, so I came here. James always said you were a man who kept his word." She lifted her chin and looked him square in the eye. "I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Ryland. I will work. I can cook, mend clothes, or muck out stalls. Just let my children stay warm and have full bellies until spring." Ryland put his coffee cup down. "And what if I say no?" Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "Then I will thank you for the meal and the shelter for the night, and I will be on my way in the morning." "To go where?" She had no answer for that. There was nowhere to go. Ryland watched her for a long, quiet moment. He finally let out a low, tired sigh. "You are not leaving," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Not in this storm, not with those children looking half-starved." He looked at her, his eyes full of a decision that was final. "You will stay here as long as you need to." "Mr. Ryland, There are conditions," he cut in. "You and the children sleep in the house. I will take the barn. You can cook, but you are not to touch any ranch work until you get your strength back. The children stay close and stay warm. Is that understood?" She could only nod, her throat too tight for words. "Good." He finished his coffee and placed the cup in the wash basin. "I will be up before sunrise. If you or the kids need anything, just knock on the barn door. Get some sleep. You look like you have not had a proper rest in weeks." He put his coat back on and went to the door. "Mr. Ryland?" He stopped and looked back. Eleanor's voice was shaky. "Why are you doing this?" For a second he just stood there. Then his gaze fell on the two small children curled up under a blanket. The hardness in his face seemed to melt away. "Because nobody ought to have to beg for a warm place to sleep," he said quietly. He left before she could say another word. Alone in the warm cabin, Eleanor felt the tears finally come, hot and silent. For the first time in 6 weeks, she was not afraid. Eleanor woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. She had fallen asleep right on the floor. Morning light was just starting to peek through the window, and a fire was already crackling in the stove. Ryland was standing by the table pouring 2 cups of coffee. He gave her a short nod and set one of the cups on the table for her. "Morning," he said. Eleanor quickly got to her feet, feeling a mess. "I am so sorry. I did not mean to oversleep." "You needed the rest," he said simply. "Drink your coffee. Then we need to talk." She walked to the table and wrapped her cold hands around the warm cup. "Let the children sleep," he said, leaning against the counter. "Your horse made it through the night. She is weak, but she is on her feet. I will keep her on light feed for a couple of days." Relief washed over Eleanor. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," he warned. "If she does not get stronger, she will not make it." Eleanor just nodded. Ryland took a sip of his coffee. "I have been thinking about what you said, about working to pay me back." "I meant every word," she said. "I do not need another hand on the ranch," he said flatly. "I run this place by myself. You would just get in the way." Her heart sank. "Then what can I do?" "But I could use some help inside," he went on. "Cooking, mending, keeping the place tidy. I'm not good at that sort of thing. If you are willing to take that on, we will call it even." She just stared at him. "That is all? That is not a fair trade for room and board for 3 people." "I will be the judge of what is fair on my own land," he said, his voice firm. "Do you want to argue, or do you want the deal?" Her throat felt tight. "I accept." "Good. Then it is settled." He left before she could say more. Eleanor stood there, holding her coffee and staring at the door. For the first time in a long time, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Life soon found a rhythm. Eleanor would wake up to the sounds of Ryland working outside. She cooked breakfast and would leave a plate for him, which he always took without a word. At first, the children were quiet and nervous. But slowly, Nora started asking questions about the ranch and the animals. Michael stayed close to his mother, but he watched Ryland with a curious gaze. Eleanor poured all her energy into her work. She cleaned the cabin until it shined, mended Ryland's torn shirts, and cooked hearty meals. The simple tasks brought her a sense of peace. A week went by, and then another. The snow fell heavy, covering everything in a thick blanket of white. She would sometimes watch Ryland from the window, amazed by his strength and how he worked tirelessly in the biting cold. He rarely spoke, but his quiet, steady presence filled the small cabin. It was a presence she was starting to depend on. One afternoon, Nora looked up from an old slate Ryland had found for her. "Mama, why does not Mr. Ryland ever smile?" Eleanor stopped kneading her dough. "I am not sure, honey." "Is he sad?" Nora asked. "Maybe someone he loved died like Papa did?" Eleanor's heart ached. "I do not know, sweetie. It is not our place to ask." But the question stuck with her. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Ryland came inside to warm up by the fire. Eleanor handed him a cup of coffee. They stood in the quiet, listening to the wind howl outside. "Your daughter asked me something today," Eleanor said softly. Ryland glanced at her. "What was that?" "She wanted to know why you do not smile." He looked away, his jaw tight. "Kids see too much." "She thinks you are sad," Eleanor added gently. "I am fine," he said gruffly. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to push a little. "Are you really?" For a long time, he just stood there, his hand clenched around his cup, did not reply. Instead, a low, rough sigh escaped him. "I was in the war," he said, his voice soft. "Got back and my wife was gone. Cholera took her. We had no kids, no other family. All I had left was this piece of land and a whole lot of quiet." He looked at her then, his eyes full of shadows. "A man learns to live with it. Does not mean I am sad. Just means there is not much to grin about." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so sorry. Do not be. That was a lifetime ago." He finished his coffee in one go. "Your husband, James, he was a decent man." "Yes," she whispered, "he was. Well, that is a memory worth keeping. You hold on to that." He left without another word. As the door clicked shut, Eleanor stood alone in the dim light, feeling the truth of his words settle over her. 3 weeks later, with the bacon running low, Ryland said he was riding to Casper for supplies. "I will be gone 2 days, maybe 3, he told her, pulling on a heavy coat. "You will be fine here." Eleanor just nodded. "We will be all right." He paused for a moment, then pulled a small pistol from his coat and placed it on the kitchen table. "You know how to handle one of these?" Eleanor looked at the gun. "James showed me. I'm not much of a shot. Good enough will have to do. Keep it with you. There are coyotes out here and worse things than that." He held her gaze. "If anyone you do not know comes knocking, you do not open that door. Understand?" "Yes." He seemed satisfied with that. As he headed out, he stopped and looked back. "There is a rifle above the fireplace. If you need it, you use it. Do not you hesitate. You have 2 children to protect, Mrs. Hartwell. Do not you dare hesitate." Then he was gone. Eleanor watched him ride off, the horse's breath making clouds in the freezing air. The silence that fell over the cabin was heavy. Even Nora and Michael seemed to feel it, moving about the house with hushed voices. Eleanor tried to stay busy, baking, mending, and reading to the children. But at night, with them sleeping beside her, she lay awake in the dark. Her hand never strayed far from the pistol under her pillow, and she listened to every creak the old cabin made. On the second day, the snow finally stopped. Nora pleaded to go outside, so Eleanor bundled the children up as best she could. They built a crooked snowman near the porch, while Eleanor stood guard in the doorway, the rifle close by. She did not even hear the horse approach. Her heart jumped into her throat. A man in a dark coat, his hat pulled down low, was sitting on horseback at her gate. He looked over the cabin, the children, and then his eyes landed on her. "Afternoon," he called out, his voice sounding friendly enough. "Is this the Double T Ranch?" Eleanor's hand gripped the doorframe. "It is. Is Tom Ryland around? He is gone for supplies. Can I help you?" The man swung down from his horse, slow and easy, and Eleanor's pulse began to race. She took a step back, reaching for the rifle. "Whoa there, ma'am," he said, holding up a hand. "I am not looking for trouble." "Oh, sure." "Name is Sam Bridger. My spread is next to this one. Tom and I help each other out now and then. Just checking to see if he needed a hand before the next big snow." Eleanor relaxed her grip on the rifle, but she did not lower it. "He is in Casper, should be back tomorrow." Bridger nodded, his eyes glancing at the children before returning to her. "Are you his wife?" "No, just a guest." "I see." He gave a smile that did not look genuine. "Well, you tell Tom that Sam dropped by. He knows where to find me if he needs anything." "I will do that." Bridger tipped his hat, climbed back on his horse, and rode away. Eleanor watched until he was a tiny speck in the distance, her heart still hammering in her chest. She did not sleep a wink that night. Ryland got back the next afternoon with saddlebags full of food. Eleanor met him at the door, so relieved she almost cried. "You are back." He looked at her face, at the worry in her eyes. "What happened?" "A man came by. Said his name was Sam Bridger." Ryland's face grew hard. "What did he want?" "He said he runs cattle nearby and that you two trade work sometimes. He just wanted to know if you needed help." Ryland was quiet for a long moment. Sam is all right. A bit nosy, but he is harmless. You did the right thing not letting him inside. Eleanor finally let out the breath she had been holding. I was not sure what to do. You were smart. That is what counts. He brought the supplies inside and set them on the table. Did you get any sleep? Not really. He gave her a long, hard look, and his expression softened. You are safe here, Mrs. Hartwell. I promise you that. I would not have left you if I thought you were not. I know, Eleanor said softly, but knowing something and feeling it are two different things. Ryland just nodded. Yeah, they sure are. The fourth week, the weather warmed up just a little, and it made Eleanor feel restless. She had gotten used to the cabin, the daily chores, and the quiet company of Thomas Ryland. But the warmer air reminded her that winter would not last forever. Spring would come, and she would have to make a choice. What would she do when all the snow was gone? Would she leave? Could she stay? She was staring out the window when Ryland walked in from the barn. You're thinking too hard, he said, placing a bucket of milk on the counter. How do you know? You get a little line right between your eyebrows when you are worried. She turned away, feeling a bit flustered. I did not realize you paid such close attention. Hard not to, he said. You are the only other soul for miles. Eleanor's throat felt tight. Mr. Ryland. Tom, he corrected her gently. You have been here a month now. You can call me Tom. She looked up at him, surprised. Tom, then. He nodded once. So what is weighing on your mind, Eleanor? Hearing her first name in his low, careful voice gave her a strange feeling of warmth. I was thinking about spring, she admitted. About what comes next. Tom leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed on her. What do you want to happen? I do not know. I cannot be a burden to you. You are not a burden, but I have nowhere to go, and I cannot just keep taking from you. You are not taking. You are working for your keep. We made a deal. Eleanor shook her head. It is not a fair deal, Tom, and you know it. He closed the small distance between them. Life is not fair, Eleanor. You know that better than anyone. But you are here, you are safe, and your children are fed. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, she whispered. That is the whole problem. His jaw set. What are you trying to say? I am saying I owe you a debt I can never repay, and I do not know how to live with that. He was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. It was the first time he had ever touched her. You do not owe me a thing, he said, his voice low. If you want to leave when spring comes, I will help you. If you want to stay, there is room enough for you here. The choice is yours, Eleanor, not mine. She looked up into his weathered face, into the quiet strength of his eyes, and felt something inside her begin to change. What if I do not know what I want? She whispered. Then I reckon you have got some time to figure it out, Tom said. Winter is not over yet. He let his hand fall from her shoulder, but she could still feel its warmth. That night, Eleanor lay awake thinking about choices. She thought about her husband James and the life they had tried to build. She thought about how quickly it had all been torn away. And she thought about Tom Ryland, a quiet, scarred man who had offered her shelter and asked for nothing. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she thought that maybe, just maybe, she would not have to face the future all alone. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the small cabin, Eleanor closed her eyes. Tonight, she was warm and safe. The rest could wait for tomorrow. The thaw only lasted 3 days. When the cold snap returned, something in the little house had changed for good. Eleanor had expected the world to feel different, but she had not expected it to feel like home. Eleanor figured Tom would pull away after their talk, the way men often did when things got too personal. But he did the opposite. He started lingering over his morning coffee and asking about the children. One day, while Eleanor kneaded bread, her daughter Nora looked up and asked, Mr. Ryland, did you ever go to school? Tom kept working on a piece of leather. Some, but not for long, he said. The war came along and I had to leave. Nora thought on that. But you know how to read. Taught myself, he answered. Had a lot of quiet time back in the camp. Nora puffed out her chest. My mama was a teacher before she married Papa. Eleanor froze, her hands deep in the dough. She had not spoken of that life in years. She felt Tom's eyes on her, curious but respectful. Is that a fact? Tom said, his voice soft. Eleanor made herself keep working the dough. I started my training, but I never did finish. How come? Tom asked. She gave a small shrug. Life, I suppose. I met my husband, James, and we got married. There just was not room for it after that. Tom was quiet for a bit. Then he asked something that took her by surprise. You miss it? She had buried that part of herself so deep, she honestly did not know the answer. I do not know, she said. Later, as she watched the snow fall, he came and stood beside her. The school in Casper needs a new teacher. The last one left in the fall. Eleanor turned to him, stunned. How did you know that? Heard the town trustees talking about it at the general store, he said, meeting her eyes. Just thought you ought to know. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Tom, I could not. Why not? He asked plainly. I never finished my training. I do not have a certificate, and I have 2 children to raise. You will not know unless you try, he said, his voice steady. It is not that simple. Maybe not, he admitted, but it is a choice. You told me you did not know what you wanted. Well, here is something to think on. He left her standing by the window, her thoughts racing. A teacher. The idea was terrifying, but it also felt like a flicker of life in a place she thought had gone cold. That night, for the first time in a long while, she imagined a future that was not just about surviving. The next morning, she found Tom in the barn. I need to go to town, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Tom leaned on his pitchfork. When were you thinking? Soon, before the next snow. I want to speak with the school trustees. He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a firm nod. All right. We will head out tomorrow. On the ride into Casper, the wind was sharp, but the sky was a clear, hard blue. The children, bundled under blankets in the wagon bed, had never been so far from the ranch. Nora's eyes were wide with wonder at the passing landscape. Tom's quiet words from the day before echoed in her mind. You are stronger than you think. She held onto them like an anchor against the nervous flutter in her stomach. Casper was bigger and busier than she remembered. Wagons clattered down the main street, and the air smelled of wood smoke. Tom pulled up in front of the general store and hopped down. He reached up to help Eleanor, his hand warm and solid around hers. He held on for a second after her feet touched the ground. You sure about this? He asked, his voice low. She took a deep breath and nodded. I have to try. All right then, he said, letting go. The schoolhouse is down at the end of town. I will take you over there, then go get our supplies. We can meet back here in about an hour. Thank you, Tom. He gave her a small nod before turning to help the children down. The schoolhouse was the simple building with a little bell tower sitting quiet at the edge of town. Eleanor's heart was beating like a drum as she walked up the steps and knocked on the door. A tired-looking, middle-aged man with glasses on his nose answered. Can I help you? He asked. Eleanor stood up a little straighter. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I was told you are looking for a teacher. The man's eyebrows shot up. You heard right. Are you here to apply? Yes, sir, I am. Well, come on in, he said, stepping aside. Name is Richard Clufax. I am one of the trustees. The schoolroom was cold and dusty. He led her to a small office in the back. So, Mrs. Hartwell, he said, sitting down across from her. Tell me, do you have any teaching experience? Eleanor felt her mouth go dry. I trained for it before I was married. I never completed the course. Have you ever been told you are not good enough? even when you knew in your heart you had what it takes. That was Eleanor Hartwell, a brand new widow with two little ones, facing a man who held her family's future in his hands. This story is about proving that grit matters more than a piece of paper. So you stick around to see how a little bit of Texas backbone can change everything. Mr. Colfax leaned back in his chair. He said, "You have no certificate, but I have taught literature and mathematics. I tutored children back in Laramie before my husband and I moved to our homestead." He studied her. "You are married?" She met his gaze. "Widowed 6 weeks ago. I have a daughter 6 years old and a son 4 years old." Colfax's face softened just a bit. "That is a heavy load, Mrs. Hartwell. Teaching is a demanding job." She stood her ground. "I will handle it the same way any working mother does, Mr. Colfax. I will do what must be done." He gave a small nod. "All right, another candidate is coming for a trial lesson next week. You come then, teach right alongside her, and we will see who is better." Eleanor's heart soared. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He shook his head. "Do not thank me yet. This other woman has the papers and the experience. You will have to prove you are the better choice." On the ride back in the wagon, Tom saw the look on her face, and a rare smile touched his lips. "You got the job?" she said. "Not yet, but I got a chance." Tom nodded. "That is all a person needs." As the wagon rolled on, Eleanor felt a wave of doubt. "What if I am not good enough?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tom kept his eyes on the road ahead. "You will be," she said, "but you do not know that." He said, "I know you do not quit. I know you have more backbone than most folks I have ever met, and I reckon if those school trustees have any sense at all, they will see what I see." Her breath caught in her throat. "What do you see?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Someone worth believing in." The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket against the cold, and they rode the rest of the way in a comfortable silence. When they got to the ranch, his hand lingered on hers just a second too long as he helped her down. "You will do just fine, Eleanor," he said softly. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The next week was a whirlwind. Eleanor dug through Tom's few books, planning lessons on scraps of paper. She practiced teaching in front of the warm stove with Nora and Michael as her students. Tom watched quietly from the corner. One afternoon, he came back from town and set a brand new slate and some chalk on the table without a word. Eleanor just stared at it, her throat tight with emotion. "Tom, you did not have to do this." "I know," was all he said before turning to leave her to her work. The night before her trial lesson, Eleanor could not sleep. Her mind was racing with all the ways she could fail. Tom found her sitting up in the dark when he came in from the barn. "Cannot sleep?" he asked, his voice low. He sat down in a chair nearby. "You know, fear does not mean you are not ready. It just means you care about how things turn out. You are scared because this matters. That is not a weakness, Eleanor. That is your strength." He leaned forward. "You have survived losing everything. You think teaching a few kids is going to be harder than that? You have already done the hard part. The rest is just showing up." A quiet strength settled in her heart. "Thank you, Tom." He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "Eleanor, I will be in town, waiting. Whatever happens, you will not be alone." The next morning, Eleanor dressed in her only good dress, her hands steady now. Nora looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are you nervous, Mama?" Eleanor knelt down. "A little bit. But brave people get nervous, too." "Papa used to say that," she whispered. Eleanor's heart ached. Yes, he did. And he was right. At the schoolhouse, Tom knelt in front of the children. "You two wait with me at the general store. Your mama has important work to do." Nora looked at her mother. "You are going to be wonderful, Mama." Eleanor squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked up the steps. Inside, the other candidate, a Miss Pritchard from back east, was already writing multiplication tables on the board. She was polished and confident. She taught with a sharp, clear voice, and the 10 children sat in silent, neat rows, their faces showing nothing. Then it was Eleanor's turn. Her hands were damp, but her voice was steady. She started with a simple question. How many of you have ever seen a sunrise? Every single hand went up. Good. Now close your eyes. Picture it. What colors do you see? A boy called out, orange. A girl whispered, pink. Another said, gold, like fire. Eleanor smiled warmly. Good. Now, what does it feel like inside when you watch it? The room was quiet for a moment, and then a small voice from the back said, hope. Eleanor's chest felt tight. Yes, exactly. That is what poetry does. It gives words to our feelings. She wrote on the board, the sun climbs slow, a golden thread, to stitch the dark away. She turned to the students. That is a line I wrote this morning. Poetry does not have to be fancy. It just has to be honest. She handed the chalk to the nearest student. Your turn. Write one true thing. And as the children began to whisper and scribble, their faces full of life, Eleanor knew she had already won. She saw the certainty in his eyes and felt a calm wash over her. Thank you, she whispered. Tom stood. Get some rest. Big day ahead. At the door, he paused. Eleanor, I will be in town. No matter what, you will not be on your own. He was gone before she could answer, leaving her with a feeling she could not quite place. Morning came sharp and clear. Eleanor put on her best dress, her hands barely shaking as she pinned up her hair. Nora and Michael watched, knowing the day was important. Are you scared, Mama? Nora asked. Eleanor knelt to face her. A little, but even brave folks get scared sometimes. Papa said that. He did, and he was right. Tom drove the wagon over the frozen ruts. No one spoke, just the sound of the horses and the creaking wheels filled the silence. When they got to the schoolhouse, Tom helped her down. You two wait with me at the store, he told the children. Your mama has a big job to do. Nora looked up at her mother. You will be great, Mama. Thank you, darling. Eleanor's eyes stung. Tom met her gaze. Just go show them what you are made of. She took a deep breath and walked inside. 10 students, aged 6 to 12, sat waiting. The other teacher, Miss Pritchard, was already at the board. She was a polished woman from back east, all confidence and certificates. Eleanor's heart pounded as she watched Miss Pritchard teach. The woman was efficient, her voice sharp and loud, but the children just stared ahead, their faces empty. Something about it felt wrong to Eleanor. When her turn came, Eleanor's hands were slick with sweat. She faced the children. How many of you all have ever watched the sun come up? Every hand shot into the air. Good. Now close your eyes and see it again. Tell me the colors. A boy said, orange. A girl added pink and gold like a fire. Eleanor smiled gently. That is right. And what does it make you feel deep inside? The room was quiet for a moment. Then a small voice whispered, hope. Yes, Eleanor said, her own heart full. That is exactly it. Poetry just gives words to those feelings. She wrote on the board, the sun climbs slow, a golden thread to stitch the dark away. That is something I wrote. It is not fancy, but it is honest. And that is all poetry needs to be. Now it is your turn. Write one true thing. A girl took the chalk and wrote, the snow is quiet like my mother's voice. That is beautiful, Eleanor whispered. After that, they all came up, one by one. They wrote about things they knew, like rivers and storms and family they missed. A real spirit filled the room. When it was over, Mr. Kayfax walked up to her. That was unexpected, Mrs. Hartwell. Her heart jumped. Good or bad? Very good. He looked over at Miss Pritchard. Book smarts are one thing, but this was something else. He stuck out his hand. The job is yours if you will have it. $20 a month, and the teacher's cottage is included. We start in May. Eleanor felt her knees go weak. Yes, oh yes, I want it. Good, Mr. Kefak smiled. Welcome to Casper. Eleanor walked out into the sunlight feeling like she was floating. Tom was there with the children, and he knew just from looking at her face. You did it. She could only nod. The children cheered, hugging her tight. Tom just watched her, his expression full of admiration. I am proud of you, Eleanor, he said softly. I could not have done it without your help. You could have, he answered. You just did not have to. The ride home was different. The future felt real now, like something she could hold. She had a job, a purpose, and looking at Tom, she knew she was not alone. That night, they sat together by the fire after the children went to bed. So what is the plan? Tom asked. I start teaching in May, she said. The children and I will move into the teacher's cottage. He nodded. That is real good. It is what you were working for. Yes, she said, but the words sounded empty. He stared into the flames. I am glad for you, Eleanor. Truly. An ache spread through her chest. This man had given her everything, and she realized she could not stand the thought of leaving him. Tom, she said quietly. He looked up. What if I do not want to go? His jaw went tight. I know it is not simple. There are 100 reasons why it is a bad idea. But I do not want to start a new life when the one I want is right here. Her voice cracked. He searched her face, his eyes full of a raw hope. Do you mean that? He asked, his voice rough. Yes. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her up. His hands, warm and calloused, held her face. I have wanted to ask you to stay since the first day you came here, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just did not figure I had the right. You do, she breathed. He kissed her then, a kiss that held weeks of unspoken feelings. It felt like finally coming home. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead on hers. Stay, he whispered. You and the children, not as visitors, as my family. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, Tom, we will stay. Outside, the winter storm raged on, but inside, they were finally warm. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the quiet sounds of Tom making coffee. The children were still asleep. A pale light came through the icy window, and for the first time in a long, long time, everything felt right. She remembered his kiss and the quiet tremble in his hands. Last night, she had said yes to this man and this ranch. But the morning light brought a cold wave of doubt. When Eleanor sat up, Tom looked over at her. An unspoken question about the promises made in the dark hung in the air between them. He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her wordlessly. Her own hands were not quite steady. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied. The silence was heavy. Finally, Eleanor had to speak. Tom, about last night, you do not have to. Yes, he said, I do. She set her cup down. I meant what I said. I want to stay, but I need to know what that means for us. Tom stared into the fire, his jaw tight. I am not good at these kinds of talks. Neither am I, she admitted. He turned to face her. I do not have expectations, Eleanor. I am not asking you to be something you are not. If you want to stay on as my housekeeper, that is fine. If you want something more... His voice grew thick with emotion. I would be a liar if I said I did not want that too. But the choice is always yours. Her heart ached. What do you want, Tom? He looked her straight in the eye. I want you here. I want the children to be safe and happy. And I want to build a life that lasts with you, if you will have me." His words were a simple, honest vow. A great weight lifted from her shoulders. "I will have you," she whispered. "But we must be smart about this," she said. "The town will talk. A widow living with an unmarried man. It is a scandal," Tom finished, a small smile on his face. "I know. I have my teaching job to think about." "Then we will give them no reason to talk," Tom said, taking her hands in his. "You will move into the teacherage come May, just like we planned. You will teach, and I will work the ranch. We will court, proper and slow. When enough time has passed, we will marry, if that is still what you want." Eleanor was breathless. "You would wait for me? I have waited this long. A few more months will not be the end of me. I want to do this the right way, Eleanor. You deserve that." She looked at this steady, honorable man who was offering her a future built on respect, and her eyes filled with tears. "All right," she whispered. "We will do it the right way." The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Life was full of work, but now there were small moments, a brush of hands, a lingering conversation over coffee. Of course, the children noticed. One afternoon, Nora looked up from her slate. "Are you going to marry Mr. Ryland, Mama?" Eleanor's hands froze in the bread dough. Across the room, Tom looked up. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked carefully. Nora shrugged. "You look at him the way Papa used to look at you. And he looks at you like you're important." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Mr. Ryland and I are friends." "Friends who are going to get married?" Nora asked. Tom set his work aside. "Would that bother you, Nora, if your mama and I got married?" Nora thought about it seriously. "Would you make her sad?" "No. I would do my very best not to." "Then I think it would be good," Nora decided. "Mama is not sad when she is here." As Eleanor blinked back tears, Michael looked up from his wooden blocks. "Can I call you Papa?" The room went completely still. Tom's face was tight with a raw, vulnerable emotion. He looked to Eleanor for an answer. She knelt beside her son. "Mr. Ryland is not your papa, sweet boy. Papa is gone, but Mr. Ryland cares about you very much." Michael's lower lip trembled. "I know Papa is gone, but I do not remember him much anymore. And Mr. Ryland is here." Eleanor's heart felt like it would break. She pulled Michael into a hug, and Tom's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and strong. "You do not have to forget your papa to care about someone new," Tom said quietly to the boy. "There is room for both." Michael pulled back and looked at Tom with wide eyes. "Can I call you Papa Tom?" Tom's breath caught in his throat. He glanced at Eleanor, and she could only nod, unable to speak. "Yes," Tom said, his voice hoarse. "You can call me that." That night, after the children were asleep, Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for loving us the way we need to be loved." Tom's arm held her close. "I am not doing anything special, Eleanor. I am just here." "That," she said softly, "is everything." March came with bitter winds and blinding snow. Tom worked from dawn until dusk, breaking ice for the cattle and mending the barn roof. One evening he stumbled inside, his face gray with exhaustion. Eleanor took one look at him and pointed to a chair. "Sit." "I am fine." "Sit, Tom." Too tired to argue, he sat. She knelt and pulled off his boots. His feet were wet and freezing. "You are going to catch your death working like this," she said, wringing out his socks. "The ranch does not run itself." "And it will not run at all if you collapse," she shot back. She poured hot water into a basin for his feet. "Put your feet in. Do not argue." As he winced in the warmth, she returned with a dry shirt. "Change. I will heat up stew. You take care of us. Let me take care of you. Something in his expression softened, and he nodded. All right. While he changed, she served him a hot bowl of stew. She watched him eat, noticing the deep lines of fatigue on his face. You are working too hard, she said quietly. It is the season. It will ease up in the spring. Spring is still 2 months away. There is no choice. Then let me help, she insisted. He looked at her, surprised. Eleanor, you have the children and the house. I can do more. Teach me. I am stronger than I look. It is hard work, cold work. So is washing clothes in a frozen creek, she replied, her gaze steady. I am not asking to take over. I am asking to share the load. Tom studied her for a long moment and then sighed, a faint smile touching his lips. All right, but we start slow, model. Well, you know I'm stubborn, and so are you. I reckon that makes 2 of us. The next morning, way before the sun came up, Tom woke her and handed her a thick pair of gloves. Come on, he said. Time to tend to the stock. Eleanor bundled up good, leaving the kids asleep, and followed him out into that bitter cold. It was warmer in the barn, but you could still see your breath hang in the air. Tom showed her how to measure out the grain and check the water troughs. He taught her how to move around the cattle so they wouldn't get spooked. He asked, You ever done work like this? She answered, Chickens and a milk cow, but nothing this big. He told her, Same idea, just a whole lot bigger. He handed her a pitchfork. We'll start by mucking out the stalls. It ain't pretty, but it has to be done. Eleanor got right to it. By noon, her back was aching and her hands were raw, but she felt a real sense of satisfaction. She could see what she'd accomplished. The stalls were clean and the animals were fed. Tom worked alongside her, quiet and steady. When they were done, he handed her a canteen. You did good, he said. Eleanor took a long drink. I'm not nearly as fast as you are. You'll get the hang of it. And you didn't complain one bit. He smiled and said, Wouldn't have changed a thing if you did, but I'm still mighty impressed. They walked back to the cabin, and Eleanor felt a quiet pride settle deep in her bones. She was becoming a part of this place, building a real life with him. In the weeks that followed, she learned the rhythms of the ranch. She could spot a sick animal, mend a fence, and stack hay just right. The children helped, too. Nora gathered eggs, and Michael fed the chickens. One evening, Tom pulled out a piece of paper. I've been thinking, he said. That teacherage is just a small one-room place. It's barely big enough for you, much less the children. Come May, you will be staying there most nights. A knot tightened in Eleanor's chest. She had been avoiding the thought of leaving the ranch, of sleeping in a different house from her children, of the long days without Tom. I know, she murmured. What if we added on to it, Tom suggested. A second room, big enough for the kids. I could do the work on weekends, maybe get Sam Bridger to help. We would have it finished before you start teaching. Eleanor was stunned. Tom, that is too much. The cost alone. I have some money saved, he said, meeting her eyes. And lumber is cheap if you know where to find it. I want you to have a proper home, Eleanor, and I want the children close to you. Her eyes began to burn. You would do that for us? For you, Tom said plainly. It is always for you. She reached for his hand and squeezed it tight. The next Sunday, Tom and Sam Bridger rode out to look over the teacherage. Eleanor stayed behind, her stomach churning with nerves. She barely knew Sam, but Tom trusted him, and that was all that mattered. When Tom got back that evening, he was tired, and his face was red from the wind, but he looked pleased. It will work, he announced. Sam's on board. We will start next weekend if the weather holds. Should be done in about a month. Eleanor nodded, feeling relief wash over her. Thank you. Tom pulled her into a hug and kissed her forehead. You do not have to keep thanking me. I know, but I'm going to anyway. As winter finally started to loosen its grip, Eleanor felt like she was living in 2 different worlds. There was the present, where she felt safe, and the future, which was bright but so uncertain. She practiced her lessons with the children at night. Tom would listen from his chair by the fire, making quiet suggestions and asking questions that made her think. She was realizing he had a clever mind, much sharper than he let on. He had a knack for seeing things differently. One night, while she was struggling with an arithmetic lesson, Tom finally spoke up. "You are making it too complicated." Eleanor looked over, surprised. "What do you mean?" "All those rules," he said. "Children do not think like that. You have to show them why it matters. Make it real for them." "How?" Tom got up and walked to the table. "Pretend you are buying supplies. Flour is 20 cents a pound. Sugar is 30. You have $1. How much of each can you buy?" Eleanor blinked. "That is practical." "That is how you learn," he said. "Not by memorizing things, but by doing them." He gave a small smile. "It is how I learned to read, from cookbooks and repair manuals, things I needed to know." A realization dawned on Eleanor. "You are right. You are absolutely right. Do not sound so surprised." She let out a laugh, and Tom's smile grew wider. "There it is," he said softly. "What? You. Happy." Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at him, truly seeing the man who had given her a new life without asking for a single thing. "I am happy," she said. "Because of you." Tom's expression grew serious, and he pulled her in for a slow, deep kiss that was full of unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor rested her forehead on his. "May feels a long way off," she whispered. "Yes," Tom said, his voice husky. "It surely does." But they would be patient, because they were determined to do things the right way. And doing things right meant building a future that would last. April brought mud and melting snow, with the first hints of green pushing through the dirt. The ranch buzzed with the sounds of calving season. Tom was busier than ever, working from before sunrise until after dark. Eleanor helped where she could, learning to pull calves, bottle feed the orphans, and spot the signs of trouble. One morning she found him in the barn with a cow in distress. "What is wrong?" Eleanor asked, seeing his grim face. "The calf is breeched. I have been trying to turn it," he said, shaking his head. "I'm afraid I might lose them both." "What can I do?" "Just keep her calm." Eleanor knelt and stroked the cow's neck, speaking in a soft voice. Tom worked with steady hands, completely focused. After what seemed like an eternity, Tom let out a breath. "I got it. The calf is coming." Soon, a wet newborn slid into the straw. Tom cleared its airway and rubbed it with hay until the little thing struggled to its feet. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You did it!" Tom looked up, exhausted but relieved. "We did it." She rushed over and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tight, his heart thumping against her ear. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet victory of new life. "I love you," Eleanor said softly. Tom went completely still. Then his arms tightened around her, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you, too." They just held each other as the world outside turned green, waiting for a future that was full of promise. The work on the little house moved along quickly. Tom and Sam Bridger framed the new room and put up the walls. Eleanor brought them lunch one day and stood in the space that would soon be her children's bedroom. It felt solid and real, a future she could actually touch. Tom came and stood beside her, dusting off his hands. "What do you think?" "I think it is perfect." He smiled. "Good, because you are stuck with it." Eleanor turned to him, her heart overflowing. "I am stuck with you too, and I would not want it any other way." Tom pulled her close for a long kiss, and Eleanor felt the last of her fears melt away. She was home. The first week of May was warm, and Eleanor stood in the finished teacherage. She ran her hand along the new pine wall that separated her room from the children's. Tom had built it just as he promised, 2 solid rooms with big windows to catch the morning sun. Sam Bridger had helped set up the simple wooden beds, which Tom had sanded until they were smooth as glass. Eleanor had sewn quilts in bright colors to make the children smile. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. Tom stood in the doorway watching her. When she turned, she saw the question in his eyes. "It is beautiful," she told him. "Are you sure? If you want anything changed." "It is perfect, Tom. Truly." She walked over and took his hands. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," he said, squeezing her fingers. "Just seeing you here, knowing you and the kids will be safe, that is all the thanks I need." In 2 days, she would move in and start her job as the new school teacher. The children would sleep here while Tom returned to the ranch. They would only see each other on weekends, acting proper and respectable like unmarried folks were supposed to. It was the right thing to do. But standing there with the man who had built her a home, she felt the pain of their coming separation like a heavy weight. "I am going to miss you," she whispered. Tom's jaw tightened. "I will be here every Sunday, and if you need anything before then." "I know, but it is not the same." He pulled her into a hug, resting his chin on her head. "No, it is not. But this is just for a little while, just until the town gets used to the idea of us." Eleanor nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. That night, back at the ranch, she lay awake thinking about how much had changed since she first rode through Tom's gate. She had arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back and no hope for the future. Now she had a job, a home, and children who knew how to laugh again. She had a man who loved her with a quiet strength that made her believe in second chances. But this new life came at a price. The price of being respectable was distance, and it was a price they both had to pay because Tom was right. They had to give the town no reason to talk, but knowing that did not make it hurt any less. Moving into that little house felt like the whole town had their eyes on us. Tom drove the wagon with all their things while Eleanor sat up front, the children tucked in the back. Nobody said a word the whole way. When they got to the schoolhouse, a few of the town's women were standing around pretending to visit, but really just sizing her up. Tom unloaded their belongings, carrying boxes into the little house as Eleanor told him where to put them. He acted like a helpful neighbor, polite, but nothing more. Eleanor played her part too, keeping her voice professional. But when he set down that last box, their eyes met, and the longing between them was so strong it nearly stole her breath. "That's everything," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Ryland." Saying his formal name felt all wrong, but the women were still outside, watching and whispering. Tom just nodded and put his hat back on. "You let me know if you need anything else, I will." He turned to go, but stopped in the doorway. He looked at the children and said, "Y'all take care of your mama, you hear?" They both promised they would, and a small smile touched his face before he left. Eleanor watched his wagon disappear down the road, fighting the urge to run right after him. A moment later, Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, was at her door with a basket. "Welcome to Casper, Mrs. Hartwell. We are so pleased to have a proper teacher." Eleanor accepted the gift. "Thank you, I am honored to be here. Mr. Ryland was a great help with your move." The woman was fishing for gossip, plain and simple. "He was kind enough to help with a few repairs the school board arranged," Eleanor said, stretching the truth just a bit. Mrs. Patterson's smile got a little tighter. "Of course. Well, we are all very invested in the success of our school." What she meant was, "We will be watching you." When the woman finally left, Eleanor leaned against the closed door, completely worn out. Nora looked up at her. "Why did you call him Mr. Ryland? You always call him Tom." Eleanor knelt down. "Because folks in town don't know us yet, honey. We have to be careful what things look like." "Why?" "Because people can be quick to judge. And if they judge me wrongly, I could lose this job." Nora frowned. "But that is not right." "No, it is not," Eleanor agreed. "But it is how things are." Michael, who had been quiet, suddenly asked, When do we get to see Papa Tom? The name hit Eleanor right in the chest. The children had started calling him that, and hearing it now in this place that kept them apart made her heart ache. On Sundays, she said softly. He will come visit on Sundays. That is so long from now, Michael said, his voice small. Eleanor pulled him into a hug. I know, sweetheart, but we will be fine. We will make this our home, and time will go by faster than you think. She prayed she was telling the truth. School started that Monday, and Eleanor poured everything she had into her work. She had 23 students, from 5-year-olds to 14-year-olds. Some could barely read, while others were way ahead. She split them into groups and gave them lessons that fit their needs, moving through the classroom with a powerful sense of purpose. The children soaked it all up. They started asking questions and talking at home about poetry and arithmetic. By the end of that first week, Eleanor was worn to a frazzle, but she felt good. She had proven she could do the job. But the nights were long and lonely. After the children were asleep, she would sit by the lamp, grading papers and feeling the heavy silence of the little room. The quiet in that little house was just plain heavy. Eleanor missed the ranch something fierce, the sound of Tom working outside, the scent of wood smoke on the air, the simple comfort of sharing a space with him. She just missed him. Sunday couldn't get there soon enough. When Tom's wagon finally rolled up that first Sunday, Eleanor had to fight the urge to run right out to him. She made herself wait while the children flew out the door, hollering his name. Tom scooped Michael up in one arm and hugged Nora with the other, the pure joy on his face making Eleanor's throat feel tight. When she stepped onto the porch, his eyes found hers and held on. For a long moment, the world just stopped. Then he set Michael down and walked right over to her. Eleanor had to remind herself not to wrap her arms around his neck for the whole town to see. He asked her real quiet, "How was your week?" "Long." "And yours?" "The same." They stood close, the air between them buzzing with all the things they couldn't say. "Take a walk with me," Tom said. Eleanor nodded, and they headed down the road out of town, the children scampering on ahead. Tom kept a proper distance between them until they were out of sight. Then his hand found hers, and Eleanor laced her fingers right through his, holding on like he was an anchor. "I missed you," she breathed. "I know," he said. "Me too." They walked for a bit without a word, just holding hands, and for now that had to be enough. He told her about mending a fence on the ranch, about a calf that wandered 3 miles off before he found it, and how the aspen trees were turning bright green. She told him about her students, how a geography lesson turned into a talk about where everyone's families came from. As they headed back, Tom stopped and pulled her close, risk or no risk, and kissed her forehead. "You're doing real good," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Eleanor just closed her eyes and leaned against him. "I just want this part to be over. All this waiting and pretending." "I know, but it won't be for much longer." His hand cupped her cheek. "By the end of summer, we'll have courted proper long enough that nobody will bat an eye when I ask you to be my wife. And then we can finally stop pretending." Eleanor just nodded, trying her best to believe him. The weeks fell into a rhythm of work and waiting. Eleanor taught from Monday to Friday, walked the children to and from school, and spent her evenings grading papers, trying not to count the minutes until Sunday. Tom came every single week. Sometimes he'd stay for Sunday dinner, and other times they'd just take their walk before he headed home. The town was watching, just like she knew they would. But as weeks turned to months, and their courtship stayed perfectly proper, the gossip started to change from suspicious to approving. Mrs. Patterson even said after church one day how lovely it was to see a widow finding some companionship again. And wasn't Mr. Ryland such a good, steady man? Eleanor just smiled and said thank you, biting back the urge to tell her that Tom Ryland was so much more than steady. He was the man who had saved her life. The man who built her a home, the man who loved her children like they were his own flesh and blood, but she kept all that tucked away in her heart, sharing it only with Tom on their Sunday walks. In late June, the school year finally ended. Suddenly, Eleanor had long, empty days stretching out before her. The children were restless, missing the wide-open space of the ranch, and truth be told, Eleanor missed it too. On that last day of school, she was sitting at her desk, just staring out the window, when Tom appeared in the doorway. She jumped a little. "You're early. It's only Thursday." "I know," he said, closing the door behind him. "I had to talk to you." He walked over, his face serious. "School's out. You've been here for 6 weeks. Folks have seen us courting proper." He took a deep breath. "Eleanor, I can't do this anymore. This distance, only seeing you once a week, pretending I'm just a friend." Her heart started pounding in her chest. "What are you saying, Tom?" He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her to her feet, taking both her hands in his. "Marry me, now. Not in a few more months just to please all the busybodies in this town. I mean right now." Eleanor couldn't hardly breathe. "Tom, but our plan. I don't care about the plan anymore. I don't care if people talk. I love you. I want you and the kids back at the ranch where you belong. I want to stop all this waiting and just start living our lives." His voice got rough with emotion. "Marry me, Eleanor, please." She looked into his eyes and saw such a fierce, desperate hope there that all her careful plans just vanished like smoke. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Tom. I'll marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. A kiss filled with all the longing and frustration they'd held back for months. When they finally came up for air, he rested his forehead on hers. "We'll go to the courthouse tomorrow. We don't need anything fancy. I just need you." "You've got me," Eleanor smiled through her tears. "For as long as you'll have me." "That'll be forever, then." They were married 3 days later, right there at the ranch. It was a simple thing, with Sam Bridger and his wife as witnesses. The children stood beside them, looking proud in their Sunday clothes. The preacher was an old circuit rider who didn't ask a single question. When it was time for the vows, their voices were strong and clear. Tom didn't have a ring, but he took her hand and said, "I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by you, no matter what comes. You and these children are my family now." Eleanor's voice trembled just a little when she replied, "I promise to love you and trust you and build a life with you. You saved us, Tom. Now let me spend my whole life loving you for it." When the preacher said they were man and wife, Tom gave her a soft, sweet kiss. Nora and Michael let out a cheer, and Sam Bridger whooped so loud it made everybody laugh. Afterward, they had a simple meal of chicken and potatoes. They sat talking in the late afternoon sun while the children ran around and played. Sam raised his cider glass. "To many long years together." As they drank, Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the cider. When Sam and his wife finally left, Eleanor stood in the doorway of her cabin, her real home now, and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. Tom came up and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "You all right?" he asked. Eleanor laid her hands over his. "More than all right," she said. "I'm home." Tom kissed her temple. "Yeah, you are." That night, after the children were tucked in bed in their own little room, lying in the bed that was now theirs, Eleanor traced the old war scars across Tom's chest. "Do they ever ache?" she murmured. He caught her hand and kissed her knuckles. "Only when a storm's coming. It's nothing I can't handle." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder, and confessed, "I truly thought my life was over, that I'd lost everything that mattered." Tom's arm held her tighter. "Maybe I had to lose it all to find what I truly needed," she whispered, looking up at him. "Thank you for taking us in." Tom's face softened. "You gave me a chance too, Eleanor. I'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone." She kissed him then, a slow, deep kiss he returned with a tenderness that made her heart swell. Tucked against him, she listened to his steady heartbeat as the quiet ranch settled for the night. The distant call of cattle and the whisper of wind were the only sounds. She had risked everything coming north, and every hard mile had been worth it. She'd found her home in him. The next morning, sunlight and the smell of coffee woke her. For a second, she was lost. Then she remembered. She was married. This was her home. In the kitchen, Tom was pouring 2 cups. He smiled as she walked in. "Morning, Mrs. Ryland." Her heart did a little jump. I could get used to that sound. "Me too," he said, handing her a cup. "Sleep all right?" "Better than I have in a long, long time." The children soon appeared, sleepy-eyed, and life began. Eleanor made breakfast while Tom saw to his chores. It was simple, and it was perfect. Later, she followed him out to the barn. He showed her his ledgers and routines, then paused. "I don't expect you to work the ranch," he said gently. "You have your teaching." "I want to help," Eleanor said firmly. "This is my home now. I want to be a part of it." Tom looked at her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right, then. We'll figure it out together." They worked side by side that morning, and a deep contentment settled in her soul. This was what she needed, a partnership built on shared work and respect. When the sun grew high, Tom suggested a walk to the creek. Eleanor packed a small lunch, and they headed out across the fields of wildflowers. The children splashed in the cold water while Eleanor and Tom watched from the bank. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted softly. "This feels too good to be true." Tom was quiet for a bit. "You've been through enough, Eleanor. You've earned some peace." He took her hand. "We both have. Don't you go talking yourself out of it." She nodded, letting his conviction calm her fears. That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun bled gold across the sky. "What happens now?" she asked. "With the town. There's going to be talk." "Let 'em talk." His voice was solid as rock. "We did things proper. If anyone has a problem with it, they can come see me." "You sound so sure," she said with a small smile. "I'm sure about us," he said, gesturing to the ranch and the children. "That's all that matters." Eleanor leaned against him, feeling his strength. "I love you, Tom Ryland." "I love you too, Eleanor Ryland." As the first stars appeared, she thought about their future. Life would still have its hardships, it always did, but facing it together changed everything. The talk started that Sunday at church, just as she'd known it would. When they walked in, a hush fell over the room, followed by a wave of whispers. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up, and the banker muttered to his wife. Tom's jaw set, but he led Eleanor and the children to a pew, meeting every stare with a calm gaze. Eleanor kept her head high, though her stomach was in knots. After the service, Mrs. Patterson cornered them. "Why, Mrs. Hartwell? Or is it Mrs. Ryland now?" Her smile was pure vinegar. "Such a surprise. We had no idea you two were in such a hurry." Before Eleanor could find her voice, Tom stepped in. "When you know, Mrs. Patterson. No sense in waiting." "How romantic," she sniffed. "It just seems awfully sudden, after only a few months." "It was long enough," Tom said flatly. Mrs. Patterson's eyes flashed. "Well, congratulations. I am certain the school board will find this news very interesting." The threat hung in the air. Just then, Sam Bridger and his wife joined them. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," Sam said with a big grin. "Talking about the wedding? It was a fine ceremony. My wife here baked the cake." Mrs. Patterson looked stunned. "You were there?" "Sure was," Sam boomed, clapping Tom on the back. "About time this man found some happiness." Sam's wife added, "And Mrs. Ryland is a wonderful teacher. Our niece has learned so much." Mrs. Patterson's smile soured. "I see." She turned and marched away. Eleanor breathed out. "Thank you." "Don't you mind her," Sam said. "She's just looking for a fuss." Tom shook his hand. "I appreciate it, Sam." "Nonsense. You just be good to her." On the walk to the wagon, Eleanor saw a mix of faces. Some were disapproving, but others offered warm smiles and quiet congratulations. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. On the ride home, Tom took her hand. "You all right?" She nodded. "I just didn't expect it to sting so much." "Folks'll find something new to gossip about next week," he assured her. "And the school board? If they've got a problem with their best teacher being married, then they're bigger fools than I thought." Tom to believe him, but a cold fear still lingered. 2 days later, a horse trotted up to the ranch. It was Richard Kilfax. Eleanor was out pulling weeds in her garden. She stood up, wiping her hands on her apron as he tied his horse to the fence. "Mrs. Ryland," he said, tipping his hat. "Got a minute?" Her stomach dropped. "Of course, won't you come inside?" "This won't take but a moment." He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "The school board had a meeting yesterday. There's been some talk about your recent marriage." Eleanor's heart just sank. "I see." "Some of the members feel a married woman's place is in her own home, taking care of her family, not in a schoolhouse." The words felt like a slap. She made herself stand up straight. "Mr. Kilfax, I've been doing my job for 4 months, and my students are doing just fine. Me getting married doesn't change my ability to teach." "I agree," Kilfax said, his voice quiet. "Which is why I fought for you to stay on." Eleanor blinked, confused. "You... what?" His expression softened. "You are a fine teacher, Mrs. Ryland, the best this town has had. I made it plain to the board that if they let you go, they would have to find someone else to balance the books." That got their attention. Relief washed over Eleanor so completely she felt her knees might give way. "Thank you." "Do not thank me just yet." Kilfax held out a piece of paper. "This is your contract for the coming year. The pay is the same, but you have to understand, people will be watching. You will have to be perfect in every single thing you do." Eleanor took the contract, her hands shaking. "I understand." "Good." Kilfax looked over at the house where Tom was standing on the porch. "Your husband seems like a good man. Make sure he knows what you are up against." "He will support me," Eleanor said softly. "He always does." Kilfax tipped his hat, climbed onto his horse, and rode off. Eleanor just stood there holding the contract until she felt Tom's arms wrap around her. "You got the job," he said. "I got the job. Got the..." She turned around and buried her face in his chest. "But it is going to be difficult, Tom. People will watch me like a hawk. You will not make any mistakes." Tom's voice was solid as oak. "You are strong enough for this, Eleanor. And if anyone causes you trouble, they will have to answer to me." Eleanor looked up into his protective eyes, and her fear began to fade. "I do not want you fighting my fights. I am not fighting them for you. I am standing right here beside you while you fight them." He gently held her face in his hands. "That is what partners are for." She kissed him, a soft and grateful kiss. The summer was a happy blur of hard work as they built a life together. Eleanor helped Tom on the ranch, learning the rhythms of the land and the animals. The children grew strong and tanned under the sun, learning to ride and work alongside the adults. Tom taught Michael to fish in the creek and track rabbits. He showed Nora the names of the wildflowers that painted the plains and how to read the clouds for a coming storm. Eleanor watched them, her heart full. Tom had become a father so naturally. He was patient and steady, a solid rock where her late husband James had been a dreamer. The children who had arrived so scared now laughed freely and slept without nightmares. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch, Nora climbed into Tom's lap. "Papa, Tom, will you always be right here?" Tom held her tight. "For as long as you need me, little bird. What about when I am grown up? Even then, I will be the old man on this porch telling you stories you already know by heart." Nora giggled. "And will Mama be here too?" "Right beside me," Tom answered, looking at Eleanor. "Always." Eleanor's eyes welled with tears as she reached for his hand. When school started that fall, Eleanor walked into her classroom with her head held high. Some parents were suspicious, a few were downright hostile, but most just wanted their children to learn. And learn they did. Eleanor taught with a passion and a fairness that could not be denied. She was beyond reproach, just as Kfax warned she must be. It was tiring work, but it was good work. By winter, even her harshest critics had to admit their children were learning more than ever before. The town's respect for Mrs. Ryland grew, and the whispers died down. Life found a peaceful rhythm. One snowy evening, Tom came inside to find her writing in a small book at the kitchen table. "What are you writing?" he asked. "Just some thoughts," she said with a smile. "Things I want to hold on to." He came over and read her words. "You are writing about the day you got here." "Yes. I was just thinking how much has changed." She put her pen down. "A year ago, I was lost. I thought my life was over. And now you have found a new one," Tom said gently. Eleanor nodded. "I wanted to write it down so I would never forget." Tom pulled her up from the chair and into his arms. "We have come a long way together." "We certainly have," she whispered, listening to his steady heartbeat. The seasons turned, one into the next. The children grew taller. Michael started school with his mother as his teacher, and Nora became a bright young girl who loved to read. Tom and Eleanor worked the ranch, their bond deepening with every passing day. They learned to read each other's moods without a word. On the anniversary of their second year, Tom took Eleanor to the creek where they had first sat as a family. The children were spending the day with friends. It was just the two of them. Tom laid a blanket on the grass by the water. "Do you ever have second thoughts?" he asked her quietly. Eleanor looked at him confused. "About what?" "About this life. About marrying me." Eleanor took his hand in hers. "Tom Ryland, this is the life that saved me. You gave my children a father. You gave us a home when we had nothing. You gave me a reason to believe again." She leaned against him. "I have never regretted a single day." Tom pulled her closer. "I thought I was meant to be alone out here. That was just my lot in life. Then you came through that gate with two frightened children and everything changed. For the better." "For the better," he agreed, kissing her forehead. "You saved me, too." Eleanor. She held on to that name. They sat there a good long while, just holding each other, listening to the sounds of the land. Later, walking back hand in hand, Eleanor thought about all she'd learned in the past 2 years. She learned about being tough, about trust, and about the difference between just surviving and really living. She had come to Wyoming with nothing but a desperate prayer. And here, she'd found a life bigger than she'd ever dreamed. Not because Tom saved her from her problems. He saved her by believing she could solve them herself. That night, sitting on the porch, she asked him, "What do you reckon the next 10 years will bring?" He looked at her. "More of this, I hope, and maybe a few more little ones if we're blessed." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. They had talked about it, sure, but hearing him say it so plain made it feel real. "You'd want that?" she asked. He nodded. "Only if you do." The thought of another baby didn't scare her like it might have once. "I think I do," she said, her voice soft. "I think I'd like that a whole lot." And just like that, the years started rolling by. Michael grew into a serious boy who loved working the ranch with Tom. Nora always had her nose in a book, talking about going to college and becoming a writer. And in the spring of Eleanor's third year of teaching, a little girl was born, with Tom's gray eyes and her own dark hair. They named her Hope. Eleanor took a year off from teaching to be with the baby, and when she went back, she felt a new kind of confidence. She knew who she was now, a teacher, a wife, and a mother, all woven together. The town had come to accept her. Old Mrs. Patterson might still sniff in disapproval sometimes, but even she couldn't deny that Eleanor Ryland was good for Casper. The school was doing better than ever. Tom's ranch grew too. He bought more land and put up a bigger barn. Through droughts and hard winters, their partnership was the one thing that never faltered. It was a quiet, steady love that had grown into something you just could not shake. One warm summer evening, 10 years after she'd first arrived, the whole family was on the porch for supper. Michael was 14 now, tall and lean. Nora, 12 years old, was reading a book while she ate. And 7-year-old Hope was chattering on about some kittens in the barn. Eleanor looked at her family and felt a deep, peaceful happiness. Tom caught her eye from across the table and gave her that smile, the one that was only for her. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "Just how grateful I am," she said, reaching for his hand. "For all of it. For you." His hand tightened around hers. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," she whispered back. As the sun went down, Tom pulled her close. "You ever wonder what might have happened if things went different?" he asked. Eleanor just shook her head. "No, because I don't think any other place on earth would have felt like home." This was what she had been searching for all that time. Not for someone to rescue her, but for a place where she could just be herself. A partner who saw her strength instead of her weakness. A life they had built from the ground up with their own 2 hands. They were 2 lost souls who had found their way home, right here, together. Years later, when Eleanor was old and gray, she'd sit in that same rocking chair and tell her grandkids the story. She'd tell them about the desperate ride through the snow and the man who wouldn't let her sleep in the barn. She would tell them about the hard times, the gossip, and the moments when it all felt like too much. But mostly she would tell them about the miracles. The small, everyday kind that come from kindness and from choosing each other, day after day. And she'd tell them that sometimes, when you lose everything, you find exactly what you were meant to have all along. Her life was hard-won and deeply cherished. And it was enough. It was more than enough. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.